The afternoon sunlight streamed gently through the thin curtains of the small dining room, spreading a warm glow across the wooden table where I was carefully arranging plates, spoons, and bowls filled with dishes that had been cooking since early morning. For me, preparing food was never just a chore, it was an expression of care, a quiet language of love that I had grown up watching my mother use to hold our family together. Every spoon of spice, every patient stirring of the pot, carried something unspoken, a way of saying, "You matter to me," without words. Earlier that day, my husband Adnan had called with a cheerful tone in his voice, the kind that always made me pause whatever I was doing and smile before even realizing it. He said, "Rania, I'm bringing a few friends home after work. Don't stress yourself, just make something simple." He always said that word, simple. But for me, simple didn't mean quick or ordinary. For him, simple meant food that reminded him of comfort, of home, of love simmered into every grain of rice. He knew I would take care of it, and somewhere deep down, I loved how much trust he placed in me. By the time the doorbell rang, the house smelled of fragrant biryani, soft bread fresh from the pan, and caramelized onions. I smoothed my dress, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, and opened the door. There stood Adnan, his smile familiar and warm, surrounded by 3 of his friends. They all carried laughter on their lips, as if it had followed them inside along with the evening breeze. Adnan's eyes met mine with that glance I knew so well, one that spoke of pride and affection all at once. He introduced his friends with his usual ease, and then added, "This is Rania, my wife. She's the reason I come home early." The men laughed, and I greeted them warmly before inviting them inside. I guided them to the table, offering water as they settled down, their voices filling the house with energy. One of them sniffed the air and said, "That smells amazing." I smiled softly and began serving, laying the dishes one by one on the table. Their eyes lit up as the bowls were uncovered, as though they had not just found food, but a memory of something lost and craved. "You're spoiling us, Rania," one of them said as he filled his plate. "This is more than food, it feels like home." His words struck me quietly, because that was exactly what I had hoped for. I didn't just want to feed them. I wanted them to feel welcome, to feel cared for, to carry a piece of warmth with them when they left. As they ate, I sat beside Adnan, listening to the conversations, watching their laughter bounce across the room like echoes of brotherhood. Adnan looked at me once, his eyes full of quiet gratitude. It wasn't just pride in my cooking. It was the way he seemed to say without words that I had added something to his world, something precious. That night, after his friends left and the table was cleared, Adnan remained seated for a while, his face still carrying the glow of laughter. Then he turned to me and said softly, "You know, they couldn't stop talking about how much they felt cared for. You gave them more than food, Rania. You gave them belonging." His words sank into me, and though I didn't reply, I knew he was right. Sometimes, without realizing it, we serve more than meals, we serve pieces of our hearts. Days passed, then weeks, and before long, these visits became something of a tradition. Every now and then, Adnan would bring his friends over after work. Sometimes they came tired and weary, sometimes buzzing with excitement about new projects, sometimes simply looking for a break from the outside world. Each time, I prepared the food with the same quiet devotion, and each time I saw their expressions soften as though stepping into our home eased a weight from their shoulders. One evening, after everyone had eaten and the table was almost cleared, one of his quieter friends, Farhan, stayed behind while the others gathered in the living room. He looked hesitant at first, then spoke in a tone that carried more honesty than casual talk usually allowed. "Rania, you may not realize this, but what you do here, it's rare. You don't just host us. You remind us of our own homes, our mothers, our families. Some of us live alone. Some of us don't get to hear anyone ask, 'Did you eat enough?' Your care fills a space we don't even admit is empty." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and nodded. Later that night, I told Adnan what Farhan had shared. He listened quietly, his expression softening. "You're touching lives, Rania." "Not just mine," he said gently. His words stayed with me long after, filling me with a sense of quiet purpose. Weeks later, on a stormy evening, Adnan and his friends arrived drenched from the sudden rain. I rushed to bring them towels, ushering them inside with concern, and quickly served steaming bowls of soup to warm them. They laughed as they dried themselves, teasing one another about the rain, their clothes damp and sticking, while the house filled with the sound of rain against the windows. But that night was different. Instead of just serving and watching from a distance, I sat down with them. We talked about childhoods, about the roads that led each of them here, about the struggles that life sometimes hides behind laughter. They shared memories of their mother's cooking, stories of their dreams, worries about their futures. I listened, sometimes speaking, sometimes just holding space for their words. And in that moment, I realized that my role had quietly grown. I wasn't just offering food anymore. I was offering shelter, a place where hearts could rest for a while, where they could be vulnerable without judgment. Adnan sat beside me, watching, and when our eyes met, I saw something new in his gaze. Pride, yes, but also tenderness, as if he was seeing me not just as his wife, but as someone who had created a safe haven for those he cared about. Our marriage began to feel different after that. Not because anything grand had changed, but because in the midst of the ordinary, love had found a deeper rhythm. It was in the way Adnan reached for my hand under the table when his friends complimented the food. It was in how he quietly carried dishes to the kitchen after they left, without being asked. It was in how we shared glances across the room, across the laughter, as if silently reminding each other that we were partners in this small act of giving. I started to understand that romance doesn't always wear the clothes of grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes, it lives in the most ordinary places, in serving meals, in setting out fresh towels, in asking someone if they are warm enough. Love, I realized, was in the details, in the daily, in the things that often went unnoticed. Months later, one evening, Adnan came home carrying a small wrapped box. He placed it gently on the table in front of me, his smile carrying a secret. "They wanted me to give you this," he said. I opened it carefully and found a delicate bracelet inside, simple yet beautiful. Alongside it was a handwritten note signed by all his friends. "To Rania, who serves more than food. Thank you for reminding us that kindness still exists." Tears blurred my eyes as I read the words. It wasn't the bracelet itself that moved me, but the acknowledgement, the realization that what I had thought of as small acts had left such an impression on their hearts.